When a destitute widow is abandoned at a remote Nebraska Territory outpost in 1867, a desperate rancher with 2 motherless children makes her an impossible proposition that could save them destroy what little they have left. But as Catherine Morrison discovers that love can bloom from the most practical arrangements, will she be strong enough to fight for the family she never expected to find when her past threatens to tear them apart? The stagecoach wheels stopped turning, and Catherine Morrison knew her old life had ended forever. Dust swirled around her black dress as the driver threw her small bag onto the ground beside the wooden sign that read, Fort Kearney, population 847. The September heat made her feel dizzy, but not as dizzy as the thought of being completely alone in the world. "This is as far as your ticket takes you, ma'am," the driver called down from his high seat. His voice wasn't mean, but it wasn't kind either. "Next coach comes through in 2 weeks." Catherine picked up her carpet bag and watched the stagecoach roll away toward the horizon. The bag contained everything she owned now: 3 dresses, her dead husband's letters, and the silver locket he had given her before marching off to war. The locket was the only thing worth any money, but she could never sell it. It held the only picture she had of William. Her sister's last words still rang in her ears like church bells that wouldn't stop. "We can't feed another mouth, Catherine. You'll have to find your own way." After William died at Gettysburg, Catherine had lived with Margaret's family for 2 years. But when the farm had a bad season, Margaret's husband had made his choice clear. Catherine was not truly family, just a burden they could no longer carry. The fort bustled with activity, even in the afternoon heat. Soldiers walked between buildings, their blue uniforms dark with sweat. Wagon trains prepared for journeys west, with families loading supplies and checking their oxen. Children ran between the wheels, playing games that seemed impossible in such a serious place. Everyone had somewhere to go and someone waiting for them. Catherine walked toward the trading post, her boots raising small clouds of dirt with each step. Inside, the store smelled like coffee beans, leather, and tobacco. The man behind the counter looked up from his ledger book when she entered. "Help you with something, ma'am?" His eyes took in her morning dress and single bag. She could see him making judgments about her situation. "I need to find work," Catherine said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And a place to stay." The storekeeper scratched his gray beard. "Work's hard to come by for a woman alone. Most folks around here need farmhands or soldiers." "Not," he trailed off. But Catherine understood. "Not widows with no skills except keeping house." "I can cook and sew," she offered. "I can read and write. I helped my sister with her children." "Might be something at the boarding house?" The man said slowly. "Mrs. Patterson sometimes needs help with the washing, but it don't pay much, and she's particular about who she takes on." Catherine thanked him and left the store. Outside, the sun seemed even hotter than before. She sat on a wooden bench near the water trough and opened her bag. Inside, wrapped in her spare chemise, were the letters William had sent her during the war. She pulled out the last one, dated just 3 days before he died. "My dearest Catherine," it began, "I dream of coming home to you and building the life we planned. I dream of children laughing in our kitchen and you singing while you work in your garden. Hold on to those dreams for both of us, my love. They are what keep me fighting." Catherine folded the letter carefully and put it away. William's dreams had died with him, and now she wasn't sure what dreams were left for her to hold on to. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up. A man on a large bay horse was riding toward the fort, and Catherine could see 2 small figures riding behind him. As they got closer, she noticed the man's clothes were well made but dusty from travel. His hat shadowed his face, but she could see the strong line of his jaw and the way he sat straight in the saddle. The children behind him looked tired. The little girl, maybe 6 years old, had blonde hair that stuck to her sweaty forehead. The boy appeared older, perhaps 8, and he held his sister protectively as they rode. Both children wore clothes that had been well made but were now wrinkled and dirty from the road. The man dismounted near the water trough where Catherine sat. Up close, she could see he was probably in his 30s, with dark hair that needed cutting and gray eyes that looked like they had seen too much sadness. When he removed his hat, She noticed the lines around his eyes that spoke of worry and sleepless nights. "Easy there, Star," he murmured to his horse, patting the animal's neck. The horse was beautiful, clearly well-bred and well cared for. This was not a poor man's mount. The little girl slid down from the horse and immediately ran to the water trough. She cupped her hands and drank deeply, water dripping down her chin. The boy followed more slowly, keeping one eye on his father. "Papa, can we rest here tonight?" the girl asked. "I'm so tired of riding." The man's expression softened as he looked at his daughter. "We'll see, Emma. Let me talk to the folks at the fort first." Catherine watched this family interaction with a mixture of longing and sadness. She remembered how William used to speak about the children they would have someday. Now she wondered if she would ever be anything more than an unwanted guest in other people's lives. The little girl noticed Catherine sitting on the bench and walked over with the fearless curiosity that only young children possess. "Are you waiting for someone?" Emma asked, tilting her head to one side. Catherine felt her throat tighten. "No, sweetheart, I'm not waiting for anyone." "We're not waiting either," Emma said matter-of-factly. "We're looking for a new place to live. Our old house got too sad after Mama went to heaven." The simple words hit Catherine like a physical blow. This family had lost someone too. The man, the children's father, looked over when he heard his daughter talking to a stranger. "Emma, come away from the lady," he called. "She doesn't need you bothering her." "She's not bothering me," Catherine said quickly. "She's a lovely child." The man walked over, his boots making solid sounds on the packed earth. "I apologize for my daughter, ma'am. She's forgotten her manners after too many days on the trail." "There's nothing to apologize for," Catherine replied. "She reminds me that there's still kindness in the world." Something in her voice made the man look at her more carefully. He seemed to notice her morning dress, her single bag, the way she sat alone on the bench, like someone with nowhere else to go. "I'm Jacob Brennan," he said, extending his hand. "These are my children, Emma and Daniel." "Catherine Morrison," she replied, shaking his offered hand. His grip was strong and calloused from work. "Are you traveling through Fort Kearny, Mrs. Morrison?" Jacob asked. Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm between situations at the moment." Jacob's gray eyes studied her face, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her careful words to the truth beneath. This man was clearly used to making quick decisions about people and situations. "Daniel," he called to his son, "take your sister and go see if you can find us some supplies at the trading post. We'll need coffee and hardtack for the trail." The boy nodded and took Emma's hand. As they walked away, Catherine noticed how Daniel moved like a small adult, taking care of his sister with a seriousness that seemed too heavy for his young shoulders. When the children were out of earshot, Jacob turned back to Catherine. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to speak plainly because this territory doesn't have time for dancing around the truth. You look like a woman who's run out of choices, and I'm a man with a problem that might need exactly what you have to offer." Catherine's heart began beating faster. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean, Mr. Brennan." "My children have been without a mother for 8 months, Jacob said quietly. "I've been trying to manage the ranch and raise them alone, but it's not working. They need things I can't give them. Softness, understanding, someone who knows how to braid Emma's hair and help Daniel with his reading." Catherine stared at him, wondering if she had misunderstood his meaning. "Mr. Brennan, are you offering me employment?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on his children across the yard. "I'm offering you something more than that, if you're willing to consider it. I need a wife, Mrs. Morrison, and unless I'm mistaken, you need a home." Catherine felt the world tilt sideways, as if the ground beneath the bench had suddenly become unsteady. The words hung in the air between them like smoke from a campfire, impossible to take back once they had been spoken. "A wife?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Brennan, you don't know anything about me." Jacob sat down beside her on the bench, careful to leave proper space between them. "I know you're a widow, based on your dress. I know you're alone, based on how you're sitting here with one bag and nowhere to go. And I know you have kindness in you, based on how you spoke to Emma." Catherine's hands twisted in her lap. Those are very small things to base such a large decision on. Sometimes small things tell you more than big speeches, Jacob replied. My first wife, Mary, used to say that you could learn everything about a person's character by watching how they treated children and animals in the first 5 minutes of meeting them. The mention of his first wife made Catherine's stomach flutter with nervousness. You must have loved her very much. I did, Jacob said simply, but love doesn't always get to last, as long as we hope it will. Mary died, giving birth to what would have been our third child, lost them both in one terrible night. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you, but I'm not telling you this to gain your sympathy. I'm telling you because I want you to understand what I'm offering isn't about replacing what I had with Mary. It's about building something new that my children need, and you might need too. Across the yard, Emma had convinced Daniel to lift her up so she could pet Jacob's horse. The little girl's laughter carried on the afternoon breeze, and Catherine felt something twist in her chest, a longing so deep it almost took her breath away. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Brennan? Catherine asked. A practical arrangement, Jacob said. You would come to my ranch as my wife. You would help raise my children and manage the household. In return, you would have a home, security, and legal protection as a married woman. Catherine felt her cheeks grow warm. And the other aspects of marriage? Jacob's face colored slightly, but he met her eyes directly. That would be entirely up to you, Mrs. Morrison. I'm not looking for a romantic love story. I'm looking for a partner who can help me give my children the family they deserve. The practical nature of his proposal should have made Catherine feel better, but instead it made her feel oddly hollow. After William's passionate love letters and dreams of their future together, the idea of a marriage based purely on necessity felt like settling for crumbs when she had once feasted on a banquet. But what choice did she really have? The alternative was trying to find work as a single woman in a territory where such women were viewed with suspicion at best and outright hostility at worst. Where is your ranch? Catherine asked. About a day's ride northwest of here, near Cottonwood Creek. It's good land, fertile soil, plenty of water, and a house that Mary designed herself. The cattle operation is profitable, and I employ several hands during busy seasons. Catherine tried to picture herself in this unknown place, with these unknown people. What would happen if the arrangement didn't work out? Jacob was quiet for a moment. I suppose we'd have to cross that bridge when we came to it. But Mrs. Morrison, I'm not a man who makes decisions lightly. If I'm asking you to be my wife, it's because I believe you're the kind of person who sees commitments through to the end. Something in his tone made Catherine look at him more carefully. How can you possibly know that about me? Because you're here, Jacob said. You could have given up when your family cast you out. You could have found some other way to survive that didn't require the courage to start over in a strange place. But instead, you bought a ticket to the frontier, even though you had no guarantee of what you'd find here. Catherine felt tears, threatening again. No one had ever described her journey west as courageous before. Her sister had called it foolish. The stagecoach driver had called it desperate. But Jacob saw it as something brave, and that perspective made her feel different about herself. The children, Catherine said. They've already lost one mother. What if they don't accept me? Emma already likes you, Jacob pointed out. And Daniel will come around once he sees that you're not trying to replace his memory of Mary, just trying to help him move forward. As if summoned by their conversation, Emma came running back across the yard with Daniel trailing behind her. The little girl's face was flushed with excitement. Papa, she called. The man at the store said there's going to be a dance tonight to celebrate the harvest. Can we stay and go to the dance? Jacob looked uncertain. Emma, we need to get back to the ranch. The hands will be expecting. Please, Papa, Emma interrupted. We haven't danced since Mama died. I remember how you used to spin her around the kitchen while Daniel and I watched. Catherine saw Jacob's expression change, a flash of pain crossing his features so quickly she almost missed it. This was a man still grieving, still carrying the weight of loss even as he tried to move forward for his children's sake. I think a dance sounds lovely, Catherine heard herself say. If your father agrees, of course. Emma's eyes went wide. Would you dance with us, Mrs.? What's your name? Morrison, Catherine said with a smile. But you can call me Catherine if you'd like. Would you dance with us, Miss Catherine? Emma asked. Catherine looked at Jacob, who was watching this exchange, with an unreadable expression. I haven't danced in a very long time, she admitted. I might have forgotten how. I can teach you, Emma declared. Mama taught me, and I remember all the steps. Daniel had been quiet during this conversation, but now he spoke up. Emma, you can't just invite strangers to dance with us. She's not a stranger, Emma said with the absolute certainty that only children possess. She's going to be our new mama. Catherine felt her breath catch. Jacob's face went pale, and she realized that the children had somehow overheard more of their conversation than either adult had intended. Emma, Jacob said carefully, Mrs. Morrison and I were just talking. Nothing has been decided yet. But Emma was not to be deterred. She walked over to Catherine and took her hand with complete trust. You look sad like Papa does. Mama used to say that sad people need extra hugs and dancing to feel better. Catherine felt something crack open in her chest, some wall she had built around her heart since William's death. This little girl was offering her something no adult had offered in 2 years: unconditional acceptance. Your mama sounds like she was a very wise woman, Catherine said softly. She was, Daniel added, speaking directly to Catherine for the first time. She said that families aren't just the people you're born with. Sometimes they're the people you choose to love. Catherine looked at Jacob and saw her own surprise reflected in his eyes. These children, who had lost so much, were teaching the adults about hope and second chances. So what do you say, Mrs. Morrison? Jacob asked quietly. Would you be willing to take a chance on us? Catherine thought about the empty boarding house room waiting for her, about the uncertain future of trying to find work as a single woman, about the loneliness that had been her constant companion since William's death. Then she looked at Emma's expectant face and Daniel's cautious but hopeful expression, and at Jacob's gray eyes that held both vulnerability and strength. Yes, she said, the word coming out stronger than she had expected. Yes, I think I would. Emma let out a whoop of joy that made several people across the yard turn to look at them. Daniel smiled, the first real smile Catherine had seen from him, and Jacob's shoulders seemed to relax for the first time since she had met him. Well then, Jacob said, standing up and offering Catherine his hand, I suppose we should go find the preacher and make this official before the dance tonight. Catherine took his offered hand and let him help her to her feet. As they walked toward the fort's chapel, Emma skipping beside them and Daniel carrying Catherine's bag without being asked, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years. The possibility that her story wasn't over yet, but just beginning a new chapter. The wagon lurched over another rocky patch, and Catherine grabbed the wooden seat to keep from sliding into Jacob's shoulder. 3 weeks had passed since their simple wedding ceremony at Fort Kearny, and now the endless Nebraska grassland stretched before them like a golden ocean under the October sky. But it wasn't the bumpy ride that made her stomach twist with nerves. It was the knowledge that she was about to enter the home of a woman she could never replace. Look, Miss Catherine, Emma called from the wagon bed, pointing ahead with excitement. You can see our house now. Catherine followed the little girl's finger and caught her breath. Nestled in a valley where cottonwood trees lined a winding creek, a 2-story white farmhouse sat like a perfect picture from a magazine. Red barns dotted the landscape, and cattle grazed peacefully in fenced pastures that seemed to go on forever. Smoke curled from the chimney, and even from a distance, Catherine could see flower boxes under the windows. It's beautiful, she whispered, though the words felt inadequate. Jacob's hands tightened on the reins. Mary spent months planning every detail. She drew pictures of how she wanted it to look and made me promise to build it exactly right. The reverence in his voice when he spoke his first wife's name made Catherine feel like an intruder. How could she possibly fill the shoes of a woman who had created such a perfect home? As they drew closer, Catherine noticed a man working near the main barn. He was tall and lean, with silver hair that caught the afternoon sunlight. When he saw their wagon approaching, he set down his tools and walked toward them with the easy stride of someone comfortable in his own skin. That's Henry, Daniel explained to Catherine. He's been Papa's foreman since before I was born. He helped Papa build the house. The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the porch, and Jacob jumped down to help Catherine descend. Her legs felt shaky after the long ride, and she was grateful for his steady hand on her elbow. Henry approached with a warm smile that crinkled the corners of his weathered eyes. Well, Jacob, you going to introduce me to your bride, or are you planning to keep her a secret? Henry Martinez, meet Catherine Brennan, Jacob said formally. Catherine, Henry runs this place better than I do. Catherine felt her cheeks warm at hearing her new name spoken aloud. Mrs. Catherine Brennan. It still sounded strange to her ears. Pleasure to meet you, ma'am, Henry said, tipping his hat. These young ones have been talking non-stop about their new mama coming home. Have they? Catherine asked, glancing at Emma, who was already climbing out of the wagon. Oh yes, Henry continued with a grin. Emma's been making me practice dancing so I can teach her how to waltz properly for when you have parties. And Daniel's been reading every book in the house so he can impress you with his learning. Catherine felt a flutter of warmth at this news, but also a spike of anxiety. The children had expectations she wasn't sure she could meet. Jacob was already unloading Catherine's trunk from the back of the wagon. She watched his efficient movements and wondered what he was thinking. During their 3 weeks of marriage, he had been unfailingly polite and considerate, but she still felt like she was living with a friendly stranger. Come on, Miss Catherine, Emma said, grabbing her hand. I want to show you everything. The little girl pulled her toward the house, chattering excitedly about all the places they would explore together. But as they climbed the porch steps, Catherine's feet seemed to grow heavier with each board. The front door opened into a parlor that took Catherine's breath away. Handmade quilts draped over comfortable chairs, and family photographs lined the mantelpiece. Lace curtains framed windows that looked out over the valley, and fresh wildflowers sat in a blue ceramic vase on a polished wooden table. Mama picked out all the colors, Emma said proudly. She said a house should feel like a hug when you walk inside. Catherine nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. Mary Brennan's presence filled every corner of this room. How could Catherine ever make this place feel like home when it so clearly belonged to another woman's vision? Let me show you the kitchen, Daniel offered, his voice more subdued than his sister's. Papa said you might want to change things if they don't suit you. The kitchen was spacious and well organized, with a large cast-iron stove and shelves lined with preserving jars. A recipe box sat on the counter, and Catherine could see handwritten cards peeking out the top, more evidence of Mary's careful planning and domestic skills. I don't think anything needs changing, Catherine said carefully. Your mother had excellent taste. Daniel studied her face with the serious expression she was beginning to recognize. It's okay if you want to move things around. Papa told us that you might need to make the house feel like yours too. The thoughtfulness of this comment surprised Catherine. At 8 years old, Daniel was already more emotionally mature than many adults she had known. Thank you for understanding, she replied. But I think I'd like to live with things as they are for a while. Your mother created something very special here. Emma tugged on Catherine's skirt. Come see my room. I cleaned it all by myself. They climbed the stairs to the second floor, where Emma threw open the door to a sunny bedroom decorated in yellow and white. A child-sized rocking chair sat by the window, and shelves held an impressive collection of wooden dolls and picture books. Papa made all my dolls, Emma announced, and Mama sewed all their dresses. Do you know how to sew, Miss Catherine? I do, Catherine answered. Perhaps we could make some new dresses together. Emma's face lit up with delight. Really? Could we make one with blue ribbons? Blue is my favorite color now. I think that sounds lovely, Catherine said, meaning it. Working on a project together might help her bond with Emma while giving her a way to contribute to the household. Daniel appeared in the doorway. Would you like to see my room too? His room was next door, decorated in green and brown with carved wooden animals arranged on his dresser. Catherine noticed a half-finished whittling project on his desk, a small horse that showed remarkable detail for such young hands. Did you carve this yourself? She asked, picking up the wooden horse. Daniel nodded shyly. Papa's been teaching me. He says I have good hands for detail work. It's beautiful, Catherine said sincerely. You're very talented." A pleased flush spread across Daniel's cheeks, and Catherine realized how important her approval was to him. These children had been without a mother figure for 8 months, and they were hungry for the kind of encouragement and attention that only a mother could provide. "Let me show you the master bedroom." Jacob's voice came from behind them. Catherine turned to find him standing in the hallway, her trunk balanced on his shoulder. The master bedroom was larger than the children's rooms, with windows that looked out toward the creek. A massive oak bed dominated the space, covered with another of Mary's beautiful quilts. Catherine's eyes immediately went to the photographs on the dresser, wedding pictures and family portraits that chronicled the life Jacob had shared with his first wife. "I can move those if they make you uncomfortable," Jacob said quietly, following her gaze. "No," Catherine replied quickly. "They belong here. The children should see their mother every day." Something in Jacob's expression softened. "That's very generous of you." "It's not generous," Catherine said. "It's necessary. You can't build a new life by pretending the old one never existed." Jacob set her trunk down near the wardrobe. "There's plenty of space for your things. Mary always said this room was too big for one person's belongings." Catherine opened her trunk and began removing her few dresses. Everything she owned fit easily into one corner of the massive wardrobe, looking lost among Mary's carefully organized clothes. "Mama had pretty dresses," Emma observed from the doorway. "But I like yours too, Miss Catherine. They're more comfortable looking." Catherine smiled at the diplomatic description. Her dresses were indeed more practical than fashionable, made for hard work rather than social occasions. "Why don't you children go help Henry with the evening chores?" Jacob suggested. "Let Catherine get settled in." After the children left, an awkward silence fell between the adults. Catherine continued unpacking, while Jacob stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "The children seem happy to have you here," he said finally. "They're wonderful," Catherine replied. "You and Mary raised them well." "Mary did most of the raising," Jacob admitted. "I was always busy with the ranch work. She used to say I'd have to learn to be both mother and father if anything ever happened to her, but I don't think either of us really believed." His voice trailed off, and Catherine felt a pang of sympathy for this man, who was trying so hard to do right by his children while carrying his own grief. "You don't have to do it alone anymore," she said softly. Jacob turned from the window to look at her. "I hope you don't regret this decision, Catherine. I know it's not the life you probably dreamed of when you were a young girl." Catherine thought of her dreams of romantic love and passionate devotion, of the future she had planned with William that would never come to pass. "None of us get the lives we originally dreamed of, Jacob. But that doesn't mean we can't build something good with what we have." A commotion outside interrupted their conversation. Through the window, they could see Emma chasing a chicken that had escaped from the coop, while Daniel tried to head it off. Henry was laughing at their efforts while attempting to help corral the wayward bird. "I should go help them," Jacob said, but he made no move to leave. "In a minute," Catherine replied. "Let them work it out together first. Children need to solve problems on their own sometimes." They watched in comfortable silence as Emma finally managed to scoop up the chicken, her face triumphant with success. Daniel praised his sister's efforts, and Henry applauded their teamwork. "You're going to be good for them," Jacob said quietly. "I hope so," Catherine replied. "I want to be." As evening fell, Catherine found herself in Mary's kitchen, preparing her first meal as mistress of the Brennan household. She had found beef and vegetables in the cold cellar, and the recipe box had provided instructions for Mary's favorite stew. As she stirred the pot, she felt the strange sensation of following in another woman's footsteps while trying to find her own path. Emma sat at the kitchen table, chattering about her day while she helped Catherine peel potatoes. Daniel was outside with Jacob, learning to milk the cows. Through the window, Catherine could see father and son working together in the barn, their heads bent over their task in comfortable companionship. "Miss Catherine?" Emma's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Yes, sweetheart? Are you going to stay with us forever?" The innocent question hit Catherine like a physical blow. "Why do you ask that?" Emma's face grew serious. "Because Mama said she would stay forever too, but then she went to heaven, and sometimes people leave even when they don't want to." Catherine knelt beside Emma's chair, and took the little girl's hands in her own. "Emma, I can't promise that nothing bad will ever happen, but I can promise that I'm not planning to leave. I want to be part of your family for as long as you'll have me." Emma studied Catherine's face with the intense focus that children use when trying to determine if an adult is telling the truth. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded solemnly and returned to her potato peeling. Later that evening, after the children were tucked into bed and the dishes were washed, Catherine sat on the front porch with Jacob. The October air carried the scent of wood smoke and the distant sound of cattle settling for the night. "Thank you for today," Jacob said quietly. "For what?" "For being patient with Emma's questions, for not trying to change everything all at once, for understanding about the photographs." Catherine wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. "This is their home, Jacob. I'm the newcomer here. It's my job to fit in, not to remake everything to suit myself." "Still," Jacob said, "not every woman would be so understanding about living in another woman's shadow." Catherine was quiet for a long moment, thinking about shadows and legacies and the complicated ways that love could persist even after death. "I don't think of it as living in Mary's shadow," she said finally. "I think of it as being trusted to carry on something beautiful that she started." Jacob turned to study her profile in the moonlight. "You're not what I expected, Catherine Brennan." "What did you expect?" "Someone more desperate, I suppose. Someone who would be grateful for any opportunity and not ask questions about what she was walking into." Catherine felt a smile tug at her lips. "Oh, I am desperate, Jacob, and I am grateful. But I'm also a person with my own thoughts and feelings. I hope that's not a problem." "No," Jacob said softly. "I don't think it's a problem at all." As they sat together in comfortable silence, Catherine allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could belong. The road ahead was uncertain, and she knew there would be challenges she couldn't yet imagine. But for tonight, sitting on the porch of her new home, with her new husband beside her and her new children sleeping safely upstairs, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time: peace. The scream that shattered the pre-dawn darkness sent Catherine bolting upright in bed, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Beside her, Jacob was already throwing off the covers and reaching for his rifle, his face grim in the pale moonlight streaming through their bedroom window. Another scream echoed across the valley, not human, but the terrified sound of cattle in distress. "Stay with the children," Jacob commanded, pulling on his boots with swift, practiced movements. "Henry and I will handle this." But Catherine was already reaching for her wrapper, her bare feet hitting the cold wooden floor. "What's happening?" "Sounds like wolves," Jacob said, checking his rifle with the efficiency of a man who had faced this threat before. "They've been getting bolder lately, coming closer to the ranch." Through their bedroom window, Catherine could see dark shapes moving against the star-filled sky. The cattle in the nearest pasture were bunched together, their panicked lowing creating a chorus of fear that made her skin crawl. In the distance, she could make out the glow of lanterns as the ranch hands emerged from the bunkhouse. "Papa?" Emma's frightened voice came from the hallway, followed by the soft padding of bare feet on wooden floors. Catherine hurried to the bedroom door and found both children standing in the corridor, their faces pale with worry. Daniel held his sister's hand protectively, but his own eyes were wide with fear. "It's all right," Catherine said, gathering them both against her. "Your papa and Henry are going to take care of everything." "Is it wolves?" Daniel asked, his voice trying to sound brave but trembling slightly. Before Catherine could answer, Jacob appeared in the doorway, fully dressed and carrying his rifle. He knelt down to embrace both children, his face softening despite the urgency of the situation. "I need you both to be very brave and stay inside with Catherine," he told them. "Can you do that for me?" Emma nodded solemnly, but Daniel's jaw set with determination. "I could help, Papa. I'm old enough to—" "You're old enough to protect your sister and Catherine," Jacob interrupted firmly. "That's the most important job of all." Catherine saw Daniel's shoulders straighten with pride at being given such responsibility. "I won't let anything happen to them," the boy promised. Jacob's eyes met Catherine's over the children's heads. "Keep them away from the windows," he said quietly. "And if anything goes wrong, there's another rifle in the bedroom closet." The thought of needing to use a weapon made Catherine's stomach clench, but she nodded. "Be careful, Jacob." He squeezed her shoulder briefly, and then he was gone, his boots thundering down the stairs and out the front door. Through the window, Catherine watched him run toward the barn where Henry was already saddling horses. The other ranch hands were mounting up, their faces set with grim determination. "Miss Catherine," Emma's small voice was muffled against Catherine's nightgown, "are the wolves going to hurt Papa?" "Your papa is very smart and very careful," Catherine said, hoping her voice sounded more confident than she felt. "He's dealt with wolves before." She led the children into the parlor, where she lit several oil lamps to chase away the oppressive darkness. Outside, she could hear shouting voices and the thunder of hoofbeats as the men rode out to confront the threat. The cattle's distressed calls seemed to be coming from multiple directions now, suggesting the wolf pack had split up to create maximum chaos. Daniel positioned himself by the front window, his young face serious with concentration. "I can see their lanterns moving toward the north pasture," he reported. "Daniel, come away from the window," Catherine said, remembering Jacob's warning. "But I need to watch for Papa," the boy protested. "What if he needs help?" Catherine understood his desire to help, but she also knew that Jacob needed to focus on the threat without worrying about his family's safety. "The best way to help your Papa right now is to do exactly what he asked us to do. Stay safe inside." A new sound joined the chaos outside, the sharp crack of rifle fire. Emma whimpered and pressed closer to Catherine's side, while Daniel's face went even paler. "They're shooting the wolves," Catherine explained, trying to keep her voice calm and matter-of-fact. "That's good. It means your Papa and the men are handling the situation." More gunshots echoed across the valley, followed by the sound of horses moving at a gallop. The cattle's calls were becoming less frantic, suggesting that the immediate threat was being controlled. "Tell us a story, Miss Catherine," Emma pleaded, "like Mama used to do when we were scared." Catherine's mind went blank. What kind of story could possibly distract these children from the very real danger their father was facing? Then she remembered the tales her own mother had told her during thunderstorms when she was small. "Once upon a time," she began, settling both children more comfortably against her sides, "there was a brave knight who lived in a beautiful castle with his 2 children, a prince and a princess." "Like Papa and us?" Emma asked. "Very much like Papa and you," Catherine confirmed. Now, this knight had the important job of protecting all the people and animals in his kingdom from a pack of wild creatures that lived in the forest. As Catherine wove the story, she found herself drawing parallels between the fictional knight and Jacob, giving the children a way to understand their father's courage without dwelling on the immediate danger. She described how the knight used his wisdom and skill to outsmart the forest creatures, always returning safely to his children who waited for him in the castle. Daniel gradually moved away from the window and settled beside Catherine, drawn in despite himself by the story. His presence helped calm Emma, who had stopped whimpering and was now listening with rapt attention. The sounds of conflict outside were diminishing. The gunshots had stopped, and the cattle were quieting down. Catherine allowed herself to hope that the worst was over, but she continued her story, describing how the knight and his men celebrated their victory and how the kingdom was safe once more. "Did the creatures ever come back?" Daniel asked when she finished. "Sometimes," Catherine said honestly, "but the knight was always ready for them, and he always protected his people." The front door opened with a bang, making all 3 of them jump. Jacob's voice called out, "Catherine, children, everything all right in here?" "Papa!" Emma shrieked, launching herself across the room and into her father's arms. Catherine's knees went weak with relief as she saw Jacob silhouetted in the doorway, tired but unharmed. His clothes were dirty, and he smelled of gunpowder and sweat, but he was alive and whole. Daniel ran to his father as well, trying to maintain his dignity while clearly desperate for reassurance. Jacob gathered both children against him, his eyes meeting Catherine's over their heads. "How bad was it?" she asked quietly. "We lost 3 head of cattle," Jacob replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "But we got 4 of the wolves. The rest of the pack scattered back into the hills." Henry appeared behind Jacob, looking equally tired but wearing a satisfied expression. "Evening, Mrs. Brennan. Sorry for all the commotion." Is everyone safe? Catherine asked. All the men are fine, Henry assured her. Young Pete took a scratch on his arm, but nothing serious. These wolves were bold ones, came right up to the fence line instead of trying to pick off strays. Jacob was examining his children's faces, checking for signs of trauma. You two were very brave tonight. I'm proud of you for taking care of Catherine and staying inside like I asked. Miss Catherine told us a story about a knight, Emma reported. The knight was just like you, Papa, and he always won. Jacob's eyes found Catherine's again, and she saw gratitude there along with something deeper, a recognition that she had handled her first real crisis as part of their family. Well, Jacob said, this knight is very tired and could use some hot coffee if there's any to be had. I'll make some, Catherine offered, grateful to have something useful to do. In the kitchen, she worked by lamplight to prepare coffee and a simple meal for the men who had defended their home. Her hands shook slightly as she measured the coffee grounds, the delayed reaction to the night's fear finally catching up with her. Through the kitchen window, she could see the first pale hints of dawn touching the horizon. Soon it would be a new day, and life would return to its normal rhythm. But tonight had taught her something important about what it meant to be part of this family. Not just the peaceful moments of domestic happiness, but the times of danger and uncertainty as well. Jacob appeared in the kitchen doorway, having cleaned up and changed his shirt. The children have finally fallen asleep on the parlor sofa, he reported. I didn't have the heart to make them go back to their rooms just yet. That's fine, Catherine said, pouring coffee into 2 cups. They need to feel safe right now. Jacob accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. Thank you for keeping them calm tonight. Henry told me he could hear you telling them a story even over all the noise outside. They needed something to focus on besides their worry for you, Catherine replied. I remember being terrified during storms when I was little, until my mother taught me that stories could take you somewhere else in your mind. You have good instincts with them, Jacob said. Mary always said that being a mother wasn't about having all the answers. It was about knowing how to help children feel secure, even when the world felt dangerous. The comparison to Mary should have made Catherine feel inadequate, but instead it felt like a blessing, a recognition that she was following in the footsteps of a woman who understood what children needed. Will the wolves come back? Catherine asked. Jacob considered the question seriously. Probably not for a while. We made it clear that this ranch is defended. But, Catherine, he paused, studying her face in the lamplight. This won't be the last crisis we face out here. There will be storms, droughts, maybe rustlers or hostile travelers. Ranch life isn't easy or safe. Catherine met his gaze steadily. I didn't expect it to be easy, Jacob, but I also didn't expect to have people worth protecting. Something shifted in Jacob's expression, a wall coming down, a guard being lowered. You really mean to stay, don't you? Even knowing what you're signing up for? I mean to stay, Catherine confirmed. These children need a mother who won't run at the first sign of trouble, and you need a wife who can handle whatever comes. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, sipping his coffee and studying her face. Finally, he said, Mary used to say that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about being afraid and choosing to do the right thing anyway. Your wife was a wise woman. She was, and I think she would have liked you very much. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected compliment. To have Jacob believe that Mary would have approved of her felt like receiving a blessing from beyond the grave. As the sun began to rise over the Nebraska territory, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Catherine and Jacob sat together in their kitchen, planning the day ahead. There would be cattle to check, repairs to make, and the normal routine of ranch life to maintain. But something had changed during the night, not just between Catherine and Jacob, but in Catherine's understanding of her place in this family. She was no longer just a convenient solution to Jacob's problem or a charity case who had been offered shelter. She was Catherine Brennan, wife and mother, defender of home and hearth. And for the first time since William's death, she felt like she truly belonged somewhere. The children stirred in the parlor, and Emma's sleepy voice called out, Miss Catherine, is it morning now? Yes, sweetheart, Catherine called back. It's morning, and everything is safe." As she went to wake the children and begin the new day, Catherine carried with her the knowledge that she had passed her first real test as a member of this family. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them not as an outsider trying to earn her place, but as someone who had already proven she belonged. The sound of approaching hoofbeats on the frozen ground made Catherine drop the shirt she was mending and rush to the kitchen window. Through the frost-covered glass, she could see 3 riders in dark coats moving toward the house with the deliberate pace of men who brought trouble. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized the sharp-bearded face of the lead rider, Robert Caldwell, the man Jacob had mentioned only once in their 4 months of marriage, and never without his jaw tightening with old anger. "Jacob!" Catherine called, her voice carrying across the house to where her husband was working on ranch ledgers in his study. "We have visitors!" The urgency in her tone brought Jacob to the kitchen immediately, and when he saw the riders through the window, his face went hard as granite. "Take the children upstairs," he ordered quietly. "Now." But it was too late. Emma and Daniel had heard the horses too and were already pressing their faces against the parlor window, curious about who might be coming to visit on such a cold December afternoon. "Papa, who are those men?" Emma asked, her breath fogging the glass. Jacob's hand moved instinctively to rest on Catherine's shoulder, a gesture that might have looked casual to an observer, but felt protective and possessive to her. "Robert Caldwell," he said quietly, "Mary's former fiancé." Catherine felt her stomach drop. During their months together, Jacob had shared bits and pieces of his past with Mary, but he had never explained the full story of why Robert Caldwell looked at the Brennan Ranch like a man who believed it should belong to him. The riders stopped in front of the house, and Catherine could see that the 2 men flanking Caldwell were strangers, one wearing a badge that caught the winter sunlight, the other carrying himself with the stiff formality of a government official. "Mrs. Brennan," the official called out in a voice that carried across the yard, "I need to speak with you and your husband. Official business." Jacob's jaw worked silently for a moment before he straightened his shoulders and walked toward the front door. Catherine followed, her heart hammering against her ribs with a fear she couldn't name but felt in every bone of her body. The 3 men had dismounted and were standing in a line near the porch steps. Up close, Catherine could see that Robert Caldwell was a handsome man in his 30s, with sharp blue eyes and the kind of confident bearing that came from money and social position. The sheriff, for that's what his badge proclaimed him to be, was an older man with a weathered face and sympathetic eyes. The 3rd man wore a black suit and carried a leather portfolio that screamed official documents and legal trouble. "Jacob," Caldwell said with false friendliness, "good to see you again, and this must be the new Mrs. Brennan." His eyes raked over Catherine with an assessment that made her skin crawl. She could feel him cataloging her simple dress, her work-worn hands, her lack of jewelry or fashionable styling. "What do you want, Robert?" Jacob asked bluntly. Now, the man in the black suit interjected, stepping forward with a thin smile. "Let's keep this civil. I'm Judge Harwick from the Territorial Court in Omaha. Mr. Caldwell has brought some concerns to my attention regarding the welfare of your children." Catherine felt the world tilt sideways. "The children?" "Yes, ma'am," Judge Harwick continued in a tone that probably sounded reasonable to his own ears but felt like ice water in Catherine's veins. "Mr. Caldwell has raised questions about whether this household provides a suitable environment for Emma and Daniel." "What kind of questions?" Jacob's voice was dangerously quiet. Robert Caldwell stepped forward, his expression one of manufactured concern. "Jacob, you know I only want what's best for Mary's children. But you have to admit, taking in a stranger from off the street and calling her their mother, well, it raises questions about your judgment." Catherine felt Daniel move closer to her side, his small hand slipping into hers. When had he come downstairs? She looked around and saw Emma hovering in the doorway, her blue eyes wide with confusion and growing fear. "These are my children," Jacob said firmly, "and Catherine is my wife. I don't see how that's anyone's business but ours." "Actually," Judge Harwick said, consulting his leather portfolio, "when the welfare of children is concerned, it becomes the community's business. Mr. Caldwell has presented me with some troubling information about Mrs. Brennan's background. Catherine's cheeks flamed with embarrassment and anger. What kind of information? Caldwell's smile was cold and satisfied. The kind that shows you were abandoned by your own family. Mrs. Morrison, excuse me, Mrs. Brennan. Cast out for being a burden they couldn't afford to keep. Now, what kind of mother figure can a woman be if her own blood relations found her too troublesome to support? The words hit Catherine like physical blows, awakening every insecurity she had carried since leaving her sister's house. She felt Daniel's hand tighten in hers and realized that both children were hearing these terrible accusations about the woman they had come to trust and love. That's enough, Jacob said, his voice carrying a warning that made even the sheriff shift uncomfortably. But Caldwell wasn't finished. And then there's the matter of this marriage itself. Everyone knows it was a business arrangement. Nothing more. A lonely widower and a desperate woman making a deal for mutual convenience. Is that really the kind of household where Mary's children should be raised? Emma stepped out from the doorway, her small chin raised with defiance that reminded Catherine powerfully of her father. Miss Catherine is the best mama we could ever have. Is she? Caldwell asked, crouching down to Emma's level with false kindness. Or is she just someone your papa hired to take care of you because he was too busy with his cattle to do it himself? That's not true. Daniel burst out, his voice cracking with emotion. She reads to us every night and helps me with my arithmetic, and she teaches Emma how to braid her hair, and she never gets angry when we have bad dreams. Catherine felt tears sting her eyes at Daniel's passionate defense, but Judge Harwick was unmoved. Children often become attached to anyone who shows them kindness. He said dismissively, that doesn't mean the arrangement is in their best interests. What exactly are you proposing? Jacob asked, though Catherine could hear in his voice that he already suspected the answer. Mr. Caldwell has petitioned the court to be granted guardianship of Emma and Daniel, Judge Harwick announced. As Mary's former fiancé and a respected member of the community, he has a legitimate claim to concern for their welfare. The words hit Catherine like a sledgehammer to the chest. These men wanted to take away her children, for she had come to think of Emma and Daniel as truly hers in every way that mattered. On what grounds? Jacob demanded. On the grounds that this marriage is a sham, Caldwell replied smoothly, that you've brought an unsuitable woman into your home to care for children who deserve better. Mary promised to marry me, Jacob. If she hadn't died, those children would have been mine through marriage to their mother. But Mary didn't marry you. Catherine found her voice at last, though it shook with suppressed fury. She chose Jacob. She chose to build a life here, with him. And she trusted him to make the right decisions for their children. Caldwell's eyes flashed with anger at being contradicted. Mary was young and impressionable when she made that choice. She might have realized her mistake if she had lived longer. Don't you dare speak for my wife, Jacob said, his hand moving to rest protectively on Catherine's back. Mary knew her own mind, and she chose our family over whatever you were offering. Judge Harwick held up a hand to forestall further argument. Gentlemen, please. Mrs. Brennan, I need to ask you some questions about your suitability as a guardian for these children. Catherine lifted her chin, drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. Ask your questions. What experience do you have raising children? I helped care for my sister's children for 2 years, Catherine replied, and I've been Emma and Daniel's mother for 4 months. But you have no children of your own? The question was like a knife to the heart, reminding Catherine of all the dreams she had buried with William. No, I don't. And your family found you too burdensome to support. Catherine felt her cheeks burn, but she forced herself to meet the judge's eyes. My sister's family faced financial hardship and made difficult choices. That doesn't reflect on my character or my ability to care for children. Doesn't it? Caldwell interjected. If your own blood relations wouldn't keep you, why should strangers trust you with their most precious possessions? Because she loves us, Emma shouted, startling everyone with the volume of her voice. And we love her back. And that's what makes a family. Catherine knelt down and gathered Emma into her arms, feeling the little girl's body tremble with emotion. Over Emma's head, She could see Daniel standing rigid with anger and fear, his young face struggling to process the threat these men represented. "Judge Harwick," Catherine said, her voice growing stronger as she spoke, "you want to know about my suitability as a mother? Let me tell you what I've learned in 4 months with these children. I've learned that Emma has nightmares about thunderstorms, so I sit with her until they pass. I've learned that Daniel is brilliant with numbers but struggles with reading, so we practice together every evening. I've learned that they both still cry sometimes for their first mother, and I hold them while they grieve because grief is part of love." She stood up slowly, keeping one hand on Emma's shoulder and extending the other to Daniel, who immediately moved to her side. "I've learned that being a mother isn't about the blood in your veins or the ring on your finger," Catherine continued. "It's about showing up every single day, even when it's hard. It's about putting their needs before your own comfort. It's about teaching them that they are worthy of love and protection, no matter what cruel things the world might say about them." Her voice grew stronger with each word, and she could see uncertainty flickering in Judge Harwick's eyes. "You want to know why my family couldn't keep me? Because they saw me as a burden, a mouth to feed, a problem to be solved. But Jacob saw me as a person worthy of love and respect. These children see me as someone who will never leave them, never give up on them, never make them feel like they're too much trouble to keep." Catherine looked directly at Robert Caldwell, letting him see the fierce protectiveness in her eyes. "Mr. Caldwell, you may have money and social position and legal documents, but I have something more powerful than all of that. I have the daily choice to love these children, and they have the daily choice to love me back. That's not a business arrangement. That's a family." The silence that followed Catherine's words was broken only by the sound of wind through the bare cottonwood trees. Even the sheriff looked uncomfortable with the situation he had been asked to witness. Finally, Judge Harwick cleared his throat. "Mrs. Brennan, your passion for these children is evident, but passion alone doesn't determine what's best for them legally." "Then what does?" Daniel asked, his young voice steady despite the tears on his cheeks. "Because Miss Catherine, our Mama Catherine, she makes us feel safe. She makes us feel wanted. Isn't that what children need most?" Catherine felt her heart swell with pride at Daniel's courage in standing up to these intimidating adults. But she also felt terror at the thought that their words might not be enough to keep their family together. Judge Harwick looked from the children to Catherine to Jacob, clearly struggling with a decision that had seemed simple when presented with Caldwell's petition, but was proving far more complicated in the face of this family's obvious love for each other. "I need time to consider all the factors involved," he said finally. "Mr. Caldwell, your concerns have been noted. Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, you've made your position clear. I'll be returning in 1 week with my decision." As the 3 men mounted their horses and rode away, Catherine felt Jacob's arms close around her from behind, pulling her back against his solid warmth. The children pressed close to their sides, and for a moment they stood together as a united front against whatever threat the future might bring. But even as Catherine drew comfort from their physical closeness, she couldn't shake the terrible fear that all of this home, this family, this love she had never expected to find, might be about to slip through her fingers like water. "We could run," Jacob said quietly, his voice barely audible over the crackling of the fireplace logs. It was past midnight, and the children had finally fallen asleep after hours of tears and questions about the frightening men who wanted to take them away. Catherine sat in Mary's rocking chair, her rocking chair now, she reminded herself, with Emma's small form curled in her lap like a sleeping kitten seeking comfort. Catherine looked up from where she had been studying Emma's tear-streaked face. "Run where? This is your land, Jacob. Your life's work. You can't just abandon everything because of Robert Caldwell's threats." "I can if it means keeping my family together," Jacob replied. And the word family sent a warm flutter through Catherine's chest, despite their dire circumstances. "I have friends in Oregon Territory. We could start over there." Daniel stirred on the sofa where he had fallen asleep, holding his whittling knife like a weapon he might use to defend them all. Even in sleep, his young face looked older than his 8 years, marked by the weight of adult worries no child should have to carry. And what kind of life Would that be for the children? Catherine asked gently. Always looking over their shoulders, always wondering if someone might find us and take them away. They've lost enough already, Jacob. They need stability, not more upheaval. Jacob moved from his chair to kneel beside her, his weathered hands covering hers where they rested on Emma's back. Then what do you suggest? Because I won't let that man take my children. I don't care what legal papers he waves around. Catherine had been thinking about this question all evening, turning it over in her mind like a puzzle that must have a solution, if only she could find the right pieces. We fight, she said simply, but we fight smart. How? Before Catherine could answer, a soft knock at the front door made them both freeze. Who would be visiting at this hour, and what kind of news would they bring? Jacob rose and moved toward the door, but Catherine stood as well, gently settling Emma onto the warm cushion of the chair. I'll get it, she said firmly. If it's more trouble, I want to face it head on. She opened the door to find Henry Martinez standing on the porch, his hat in his hands and his weathered face grave with concern. Behind him stood 3 other men, Catherine recognized as neighboring ranchers: Tom Wilson from the spread to the east, Pete Anderson from across the creek, and old Samuel Hayes, whose land bordered theirs to the south. Mrs. Brennan, Henry said quietly, sorry to bother you so late, but we heard about what happened today, and we wanted you folks to know where we stand. Catherine invited them into the kitchen, where Jacob joined them around the large wooden table that had hosted so many family meals. The men looked uncomfortable in the feminine space, but their faces were resolute. That Caldwell fellow came by my place this afternoon, Tom Wilson said without preamble, asking questions about your marriage, about whether I thought it was legitimate. Wanted to know if I'd seen signs that you weren't fit to raise those children. Catherine felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. And what did you tell him? Tom's weathered face creased into a smile. Told him he could take his questions and shove them where the sun don't shine, begging your pardon, ma'am. Any fool can see those children are thriving with you. Pete Anderson nodded vigorously. My wife saw Emma at the general store last week, chattering away about the new dress you made her and how you're teaching her to read better. That little girl is happier than she's been since her mama died. And Daniel, Samuel Hayes added, that boy's been coming around asking me about woodworking techniques. Says his new mama thinks he has real talent and wants to encourage his interests. Mary, God rest her soul, was a fine woman, but she never understood that boy's need to work with his hands. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes at these unexpected testimonials from men she barely knew. Thank you, she whispered, but I'm not sure it will matter what the neighbors think if Judge Harwick has already made up his mind. That's where you're wrong, Henry said, leaning forward with the intensity of a man who had fought battles before. Judges care about community opinion, especially out here where we all have to rely on each other. If enough people speak up for you, it carries weight. Jacob had been listening in silence, but now he spoke up. What are you suggesting? A petition, Tom Wilson said. Every family in the territory who's willing to vouch for you and Catherine as parents. Present it to the judge next week when he comes back. And not just the men, Pete Anderson added. The women's voices matter too, maybe more than ours when it comes to judging someone's fitness as a mother. My Martha already said she'd be first to sign. Catherine felt a spark of hope kindle in her chest. Do you really think it would work? Can't hurt, Samuel Hayes said pragmatically. But there's something else you should know. Caldwell's been spreading rumors about your marriage, suggesting it's not. Well, not a real marriage in all ways. Catherine felt her face flame with embarrassment. The intimate details of her relationship with Jacob were nobody's business, but she understood what Samuel was trying to tell her. If people believed her marriage was purely a business arrangement with no genuine affection between husband and wife, it would support Caldwell's claim that their home was unsuitable for children. What kind of rumors? Jacob asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Henry shifted uncomfortably. The kind that suggest you and Catherine are more like business partners than husband and wife. That you sleep in separate rooms, barely speak to each other, that the children are being raised by a hired housekeeper rather than a real mother. Catherine looked at Jacob and saw her own realization reflected in his eyes. They had been so careful to respect each other's boundaries, so determined not to push for more than the practical arrangement they had agreed upon, that they might have created the very impression Caldwell was hoping to exploit. "We could show them otherwise," Jacob said slowly, his gray eyes meeting Catherine's. "If you're willing." Catherine understood what he was asking. If they were going to present themselves as a genuinely married couple, they would need to behave like one, not just in private, but in public where their neighbors could witness their affection for each other. "I'm willing," she said quietly, and saw something warm flicker in Jacob's expression. The men left shortly after, promising to begin circulating the petition first thing in the morning. After they were gone, Catherine and Jacob sat together in the kitchen, the weight of their conversation settling between them like a bridge they were finally ready to cross. "Catherine," Jacob said hesitantly, "what I said about showing them we're truly married, I don't want you to feel pressured into anything you're not comfortable with." Catherine studied his face in the lamplight, seeing not just the practical rancher who had offered her security, but a man who had shown her kindness, respect, and growing affection over the past 4 months. "Jacob," she said softly, "I think we've both been so afraid of presuming too much that we've presumed too little." "What do you mean?" Catherine took a deep breath, gathering courage for what she wanted to say. "I mean that somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a practical arrangement for me. You and Emma and Daniel. You've become my family in every way that matters. And if I'm honest, my feelings for you have grown into something much deeper than gratitude or partnership." Jacob's eyes widened, and Catherine saw hope bloom across his features. "Catherine, I've been feeling the same way. But I was afraid that if I said anything, you might think I was trying to change the terms of our agreement." "What if I want the terms to change?" Catherine asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. Instead of answering with words, Jacob reached across the table and took her hands in his. His calloused fingers traced gently over her knuckles, and Catherine felt warmth spread up her arms and settle in her chest like a fire being kindled. "I love you," Jacob said simply, "not just for what you do for the children, but for who you are, your strength, your kindness, your courage in facing whatever life throws at us. I love the way you hum while you work, and the way you listen to Emma's endless chatter, like it's the most important conversation in the world. I love how you've helped Daniel gain confidence in himself, and how you've made this house feel like a home again." Catherine felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "I love you too," she whispered. "I never thought I could love again after William, but you've shown me that the heart is bigger than I imagined. There's room for both the love I had and the love I have now." Jacob stood and moved around the table, pulling Catherine to her feet and into his arms. When he kissed her, it was with the tender passion of a man who had been holding back his feelings for too long. Catherine melted into his embrace, finally allowing herself to acknowledge how much she had wanted this closeness, this connection that went beyond practical partnership. When they finally broke apart, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens with Caldwell and the judge, we'll face it together, as a real family." "As a real family," Catherine agreed. Over the next week, their neighbors rallied around them with a show of support that took Catherine's breath away. Martha Wilson organized the women to visit every household in the territory, collecting signatures and testimonials about Catherine's character and her relationship with the children. The men gathered stories about Jacob's integrity as a father and businessman, and about the obvious love between husband and wife that anyone with eyes could see. Catherine and Jacob, meanwhile, stopped being quite so careful about maintaining distance between them. They held hands when they walked to the barn together. Jacob kissed Catherine's cheek when he came in from working with the cattle. Catherine rested her hand on Jacob's shoulder when she served his coffee. Small gestures, but ones that spoke of genuine affection to anyone who cared to notice. The children bloomed under this new openness between their parents. Emma declared that she had always known Catherine and Jacob belonged together, while Daniel seemed to relax in a way he hadn't since his mother's death, as if he finally felt secure that his new family was built on a foundation strong enough to last. On the morning Judge Harwick was due to return, Catherine stood in front of her bedroom mirror, pinning up her hair with extra care. She wore her best dress, a deep blue wool that brought out her eyes, and the silver locket Emma had given back to her the night before. "For luck, Mama Catherine," Emma had said solemnly. "So you remember that love doesn't go away, it just gets bigger." Now, as Catherine touched the locket at her throat, she felt the truth of Emma's words. Her love for William would always be part of her, but it no longer defined the limits of her heart. She had room for Jacob's love, for the children's love, and for the love of the community that had embraced her as one of their own. "Ready?" Jacob asked from the doorway, looking handsome in his best suit and cleanly shaven jaw. "Ready," Catherine replied, taking his offered arm. Together, they walked downstairs to face whatever judgment awaited them, secure in the knowledge that whatever happened, they were no longer facing it as strangers bound by convenience, but as a family united by choice and strengthened by love. Judge Harwick's horse appeared on the horizon at exactly noon, but this time he wasn't alone. A dozen wagons followed behind him, filled with every family from the surrounding territory who had come to witness what might be the most important decision in the Brennan family's future. Catherine watched from the kitchen window as neighbors she barely knew climbed down from their wagons, their faces grim with determination, and their arms full of covered dishes that spoke of a community gathering rather than a legal proceeding. "Looks like half the territory showed up," Jacob murmured beside her, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently. Emma pressed her face against the glass, her breath fogging the window. "Why are so many people here, Mama Catherine?" "Because they care about our family," Catherine replied, though her voice trembled with nerves. "Because they want to make sure we stay together." Daniel appeared at Catherine's other side, his young face pale but resolute. "What if it's not enough? What if the judge still says we have to go with Mr. Caldwell?" Catherine knelt down to meet his eyes, her hands resting on his thin shoulders. "Then we'll find another way to fight. But Daniel, I want you to remember something. No matter what any judge says, you and Emma will always be my children in my heart. That can never be taken away from us." Through the window, they could see Judge Harwick dismounting near the front porch, his black suit formal and imposing against the backdrop of concerned neighbors. Robert Caldwell sat rigid in his own wagon, clearly displeased by the crowd that had gathered to oppose his petition. Martha Wilson was the first to approach the house, carrying a thick folder that could only contain the petition signatures. Behind her came a parade of women Catherine recognized from church and the general store, women who had smiled politely at her before, but were now marching toward her door like an army of guardian angels. "Mrs. Brennan," Martha called out, "we have something for the judge." Catherine opened the front door to find her porch crowded with familiar faces. Tom Wilson stood hat in hand beside his wife, while Pete Anderson held his youngest daughter on his shoulders. Even old Samuel Hayes had made the journey, leaning heavily on his walking stick but wearing a fierce expression that suggested he was ready for a fight. Judge Harwick looked thoroughly overwhelmed by the gathering. "What exactly is the meaning of this?" he asked, his formal tone suggesting he wasn't pleased by the unexpected audience. "This," Martha Wilson said firmly, stepping forward with her folder, "is a petition signed by 43 families in this territory, all testifying to Catherine Brennan's character as a wife and mother." The judge accepted the folder reluctantly, flipping through pages covered with signatures and handwritten testimonials. His eyebrows rose higher with each page he read. "Furthermore," Tom Wilson added, "we've come to speak on behalf of the Brennan family. If you're going to make a decision that affects our community, we figure the community ought to have a say." Robert Caldwell climbed down from his wagon, his face flushed with anger. "This is highly irregular. Judge Harwick, surely you're not going to be swayed by a mob of—" "Careful, Caldwell," Samuel Hayes interrupted, his weathered voice carrying clearly across the yard. "You're talking about our wives and neighbors, and we don't take kindly to outsiders insulting our people." Catherine felt Jacob's arm slip around her waist as they stood together on the porch, flanked by Emma and Daniel. Looking out at the sea of supportive faces, she felt overwhelmed by the realization that these people, many of whom she barely knew, had chosen to stand with her family. Judge Harwick cleared his throat. "While I appreciate the community's enthusiasm, custody matters are typically decided based on legal precedent, and the best interests of the children, not popular opinion. Then let's talk about the children's interests, Martha Wilson said firmly. She turned to Emma and Daniel, who had moved closer to Catherine's sides. Emma, honey, do you want to tell the judge how you feel about your new mama? Emma stepped forward with the fearless courage that had endeared her to Catherine from their first meeting. Judge, sir, Mama Catherine makes the best apple pie in the whole territory, and she reads to me every single night. And when I have scary dreams, she sits with me until they go away. She teaches me things and listens when I talk, and she never makes me feel like I'm too much trouble. And you, young man? The judge asked Daniel. Daniel's voice was steadier than Catherine had expected. Sir, Mama Catherine helped me learn to read better, and she says I'm smart with numbers. She doesn't try to replace our first mama. She just loves us the way we are. Mr. Caldwell doesn't even know us. How can he take care of people he doesn't know? Judge Harwick was quiet for a long moment, studying the faces of the family before him. Mr. Caldwell, you've presented your petition based on the irregular nature of this marriage and Mrs. Brennan's background. But I'm seeing evidence of a functioning family unit with strong community support. Caldwell's face darkened. Your Honor, you can't seriously be considering the opinions of a bunch of farmers and ranchers over legal precedent. I have legitimate grounds for concern about these children's welfare. What grounds? Jacob asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Because from where I stand, my children are healthy, happy, and loved. They're getting an education, they have a stable home, and they're surrounded by people who care about them. What more could any child need? They need proper guidance, Caldwell shot back, from someone with a legitimate claim to their care, not some stranger you picked up off the street. The insult hit its mark, and Catherine felt her cheeks burn with shame. But before she could respond, Emma's voice rang out across the yard, clear and defiant. She's not a stranger. She's our mama. And you're the stranger trying to take us away from our family. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Catherine saw Judge Harwick's expression shift slightly. He looked from Caldwell's angry face to the united front of the Brennan family, then out at the sea of neighbors who had come to support them. Mr. Caldwell, the judge said slowly, you claim to have the children's best interests at heart. But I have to ask, where were you during the 8 months after Mary Brennan's death, when these children were grieving and struggling without a mother? Where was this concern for their welfare then? Caldwell's mouth opened and closed without sound, clearly caught off guard by the question. Because from what I can see, Judge Harwick continued, Mr. Brennan found a solution that has benefited his children enormously. They appear well, cared for, loved, and thriving. Mrs. Brennan may not have been born to this family, but she has clearly chosen to make it her own. Catherine felt tears sting her eyes as the judge's words sank in. Was it possible that they had actually won? Furthermore, Judge Harwick said, holding up the petition, 43 families have vouched for this woman's character and her fitness as a mother. That kind of community support speaks to something far more important than legal technicalities. Robert Caldwell's face had gone pale. Your Honor, surely you can't. Mr. Caldwell, the judge interrupted firmly, your petition is denied. These children will remain with their father and stepmother, where they clearly belong. The cheer that went up from the crowd was deafening. Catherine felt her knees go weak with relief as Jacob's arms tightened around her and the children pressed close to her sides. Around them, neighbors called out congratulations and applauded the judge's decision. But even as Catherine celebrated, she noticed Robert Caldwell's expression of fury and humiliation. Something in his eyes suggested that this defeat would not be easily accepted, and she felt a chill of apprehension even in the midst of their victory. For now, though, their family was safe. The community had spoken, the judge had listened, and Emma and Daniel would remain where they belonged, in the home that love had built, with the parents who had chosen to fight for them. Spring sunshine streamed through the kitchen windows 6 months later as Catherine hummed softly while kneading bread dough, her movements graceful and sure in the space that had finally become truly hers. The silver locket at her throat caught the light, no longer a symbol of loss, but a reminder of how love could transform and grow beyond anything she had once imagined possible. "Mama Catherine!" Emma's voice called from the yard, bubbling with excitement. "Come see what Daniel carved for you!" Catherine wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron and stepped onto the porch, where she found Daniel holding a wooden jewelry box so intricate and beautiful it took her breath away. Tiny roses decorated the lid, and when he opened it, a small compartment lined with soft fabric revealed space for the treasures a woman might hold dear. "Daniel, this is incredible," Catherine said, accepting the box with reverent hands. "When did you find time to make something so detailed?" The boy's cheeks flushed pink with pride. "I've been working on it in the evenings after my lessons. Papa helped me with the hinges, but I did all the carving myself." Jacob appeared from the barn, leading his horse and wearing the satisfied expression of a man whose work was going well. At 34, he looked younger than when Catherine had first met him. The lines of worry around his eyes had softened, and he moved with the relaxed confidence of someone at peace with his life. "Let me see this masterpiece," he said, examining Daniel's handiwork with genuine admiration. "Son, this is museum-quality work. You've got a real gift." Catherine opened the box again, marveling at the smooth action of the hinges and the precision of the carved details. "I have just the thing for this," she said, unfastening her locket. "Emma, would you help me?" As Emma carefully placed the locket in its new home, Catherine realized how perfectly the moment captured their family's journey. The past treasured but no longer defining them, the present filled with creativity and love, the future bright with possibility. "Mrs. Brennan!" Henry's voice carried across the yard as he approached with a letter in his weathered hand. "Mail came through Fort Kearney. This one's from back east." Catherine's stomach fluttered with familiar nervousness as she recognized her sister's handwriting. Margaret's letters had become more frequent since word of Catherine's successful fight for her family had somehow reached their old community, and each one carried a tone of grudging respect that still surprised Catherine. "What does Aunt Margaret say?" Emma asked, pressing close to Catherine's side with the curiosity of a child who had never met this mysterious relative. Catherine unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the familiar script. As she read, her expression shifted from apprehension to surprise, to something approaching wonder. "She's congratulating us," Catherine said slowly, "on our successful harvest and the improvements we've made to the ranch. And she says," Catherine paused, hardly believing the words on the page. "She says she's proud of how I've built a life for myself, and that she hopes someday she might visit to meet her new nephew and niece." Jacob's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a change from the woman who couldn't afford to keep you." Catherine folded the letter thoughtfully. People change when their circumstances improve. Margaret's farm had a good year, and her husband found additional work in town. Sometimes it's easier to be generous when you're not struggling to survive. "Will you invite her to visit?" Daniel asked. Catherine considered the question seriously. The hurt of Margaret's rejection would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her worth. She had learned the difference between people who loved you conditionally and people who chose to love you every day, regardless of circumstances. "Maybe someday," she said, "but not because I need her approval anymore. Only if I think it would add something good to our lives." Emma tugged on Catherine's skirt. "Mama Catherine, tell us again about how you and Papa decided to get married." It had become one of Emma's favorite stories, the tale of two lonely people who had found each other by accident and chosen to build something beautiful together. Catherine never tired of telling it, though she always marveled at how different the story sounded now compared to how she had understood it at the time. "Well," Catherine began, settling onto the porch steps with Emma curled against her side and Daniel sitting attentively nearby, "your papa was the bravest man I'd ever met, willing to trust a complete stranger with his most precious treasures." "And you were the bravest woman I'd ever met," Jacob added, joining them on the steps, "willing to start over in a place where you knew nobody and had no guarantee of happiness." "But we did find happiness," Emma said contentedly. "Lots and lots of it." Catherine looked around at her family, her husband whose love had grown from respect into genuine passion, her children whose trust had taught her what it meant to be needed, her neighbors who had become true friends, her home that reflected her own touches alongside Mary's beautiful foundation. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly. "We found more happiness than I ever dared hope for." As the afternoon sun painted the Nebraska territory in shades of gold and green, the Brennan family sat together on their porch, surrounded by the life they had chosen to build together. Catherine's journey from abandoned widow to beloved wife and mother was complete, but she understood now that the real journey, the daily choice to love and be loved, would continue for the rest of their days. In her lap, Daniel's jewelry box held her silver locket, past and present nestled together in perfect harmony. Around her, the sounds of home filled the air: Emma's laughter, Daniel's excited planning for his next woodworking project, Jacob's quiet contentment, the cattle lowing in the distance, the wind through the cottonwood trees. Catherine Morrison had once believed her story was ending. Catherine Brennan knew it was just beginning.